Welcome to Navigate Now. This is the podcast where we discuss everything around people and places. I'm your host, John Doxey, and I'm super excited to have our guest on today's episode. So, brilliant. Thanks very much, James, for joining us on this episode of the podcast. Super looking forward to the conversation. But before we get into that, tell me a little bit about yourself and your career and where you come to this point.
Well, look, thanks for having me on. It's a real privilege, and looking forward to the conversation. So I'm James Child. I'm head of research at Ing Media. We are a communications and research consultancy, and we work with organisations and stakeholders across the built world. Now, in my role as head of research and as a data man, a numbers man, that gives me the enormous privilege and spread of being able to work with all sorts of different clients, right? So work with investors and developers. I can often work with architects, local authorities, cities, house builders, and anyone that's I say that's got a stake in bricks and mortar and/or put shovels in the ground. We work with them. So in a previous life, I spent a very long time working at Estates Gazette, the property journal. That was my first real job out of university.
Nice.
Like many people, I had no idea what I was going to end up doing, or indeed what I wanted to do. I studied politics, so was have always been interested in what's going on in public debate, and actually, especially how our places and spaces are formed, and who the custodians of those places are. So stepping into EG was actually very fortunate in that respect, because I was able to eventually start flexing some of those muscles in regards to, my work actually contributing to sometimes local debate, sometimes national debate, which I found really interesting. So I was at EG for 10 years. I had a brief stint at BNP Paribas Real Estate, where I led the industrial logistics research team, which was very different, and I learned a huge amount. But found that actually I was a little bit stifled in terms of the sectors that I was able to work in. I really missed working with office developers. I really missed working with retail agents, and I found that actually, if I was to really get the best out of myself in a role, I think I'd had to be in a more holistic position, which brought me to Ing, and I've been here for 3 years, maybe 4 years now. Really enjoying it, and really, as I said, really busy in lots of different ways. And one of the misconceptions perhaps around someone that does my job, there's plenty of analysts out there who work in real estate. There is a misconception that we all sit behind spreadsheets all the time.
Yeah, Excel experts, I'm sure.
And we are Excel experts, but actually, in my mind, we are the builders of the narrative that kind of drives our industry. So without the numbers and intelligence behind a lot of the mechanics of getting stuff built, it won't happen.
Yeah.
But aside from that, the role of an analyst is more than just to provide numbers; it's to inform. And analysts, certainly in our sector, they do that very, very well. I'm a keen advocate for trying to dispel some of those myths around, the perception of someone who sits behind the spreadsheets. I want all researchers to be able to go out there and tell their story, and make our places better and better.
Definitely. And that blend of that politics, which you kind of didn't know quite where it was going to go, that, and obviously your career and today must blend in beautifully. But there's quite a breadth there. There's a lot of experience in your career so far. But what excites you, maybe specifically around the placemaking aspect of that?
Well, I'm probably the same as yourself, John. I'm one of those individuals that when I walk up and down my local high street and I see that it might be another empty unit that's become available, I will do the mental arithmetic, and whilst I'm walking past it, and go, well, that should probably, that was a vape shop
Yeah.
or that was a betting shop. That should, for all intents and purposes, be this. And that's not just because, I really want there to be a shoe shop in my local town. It's actually more about where that unit sits in the the overall puzzle piece of a town centre, right?
I'm sure our audience is staggering because we all do that as place custodians or in that place world, which we're all in. Yeah, we can't turn it off, can we?
No, it happens all the time. And, I'm a bit of a nerd. I'll be on planning websites in my local area and trying to figure out what's going on. I'm not a NIMBY by any stretch.
Yeah.
I'm a NIMBY, but, when I see a planning application going for especially something in a town centre, I'm like, look, that has to be it has to be the right thing, because the vitality of our spaces really depends on getting that bit right. And you'll recognise this as well. The fragmentation of places is so evident. Pockets of leisure, pockets of this, pockets of that, which is fine when it's done right, but when it's done wrong, it kind of creates spaces that aren't accessible or amenable to anybody. The residents that live there, but also the people that may or may not pass through. So, in a roundabout way, the most important parts of one of the most important parts of a fully functioning society, in my mind, and I suspect, talking out loud here, but maybe that's where my politics background kind of brings it in. So,
cool, brilliant. That's really good. So, maybe before we jump into our breadth of conversation, we always on the podcast always say we like to get to know the person behind the conversation. So we'd love to hear something fun or interesting about James. You mentioned NIMBY. You're not one of those.
Look, I kind of tried to earlier on dispel the myth around numbers and data, but I do love numbers. There was a period in time where I could name all of the countries in the world, which I'm very, very proud of.
200 something, is it?
197.
197, cool.
Unless you count certain principalities, which but anyway, so very nerdy in that respect. I can also say the alphabet backwards.
Cool.
Not
going to test you on it just yet.
I won't do it live. If anyone's interested, they can ask me at events, but in around 4 seconds, which is one of my party tricks that I like to get out at Christmas time.
Love it. Well, there you go. Perfect. Brilliant. Cool. Love that. So brilliant. Super looking forward to this conversation. Maybe just to kick us off, I wanted to think about that before they arrive. So how digital behavior shapes that visitor journey? Because I guess the experience of places now starts online and not necessarily on arrival of that place. So how do we then best understand and influence this pre-visit experience moment as part of that visiting of that particular place? And just maybe to kick off that core idea is how does the digital landscape change the way people form their expectations about a place before they even get there?
That's a very broad question. I suspect that we can talk around this for quite some time because as you rightly said, the digital landscape is evolving at such speed that actually, a lot of the work that we've done this year is really informative right now, at this moment in time. If you fast forward about to 2030, I suspect that it will have changed again in ways that we can't really comprehend at the moment. Now, a few examples of that are that if we look at how individuals experience places, the user journey has evolved significantly over the past 20, 30 years. What we've seen in the past decade is this absolute explosion of social media, which did exist about 15 years ago, but social media was really a friends network / marketing kind of product, really, above all. But since the evolution of things like TikTok, things like Instagram, they are now platforms where people can very, very easily tell stories very, very quickly. Okay. Now, you do not have to be a content creator or a video producer or an audio specialist to create a piece of content about a place that can go viral in an instant. And that's been the real game changer, because it opens up a whole new conversation in this instance about places and how people feel about places, what they're saying about places. And as you said, this is well before arrival. I mean, you will know as well as I do that certain, especially when thinking about younger audiences are actually taking active decisions based on social media now. The good example is where they travel. There are hundreds of stats out there around, Gen Zs making places decisions of where to go on holiday based on what they've seen on TikTok. Which, if you said that about 15, 20 years ago, you'd be like, what?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's completely evolved. So that's one example of it. But
I guess kind of before we would, in that kind of this kind of scenario, we would just rely on, take the holiday scenario.
Yeah.
We'd be reliant on word of mouth, someone who's been there before. Maybe the old travel like bureau or the travel shop,
travel agents,
where we go in to get a magazine and see that's a curated journey, or maybe a TV ad. But that's, I guess, all we had to decide to go to a particular place or holiday in that situation, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yes, and it's completely changed. And but there's a second thing that has evolved over the past 5 years or so, which is what you might define micro influencer sphere of influence. And as I said, anyone can pick up a phone now and record anything, and it can potentially go viral within hours.
Yeah.
Now that has actually very serious and significant consequences for places, because it can actually go some way to undermining your place branding strategy. If you are a small town in the UK, and you have a defined strategy around how you position yourself to or against other towns in your area, why would I go and visit X town? And the branding proposition might be, well, it's because we've got the eldest pubs in the area and we do great food, or might be something else. But if somebody goes on TikTok, records a video about your place and says, this place isn't very nice, don't go here, and I'm choosing my words carefully here because it happens all the time, right? Then your sphere of influence, your immediate sphere of influence is closed.
Yeah.
The influence that person has had on your brand narrative is quite explosive. And I've been at conferences this year and spoken to lots of local leaders, city leaders, local authority leaders, and they've said, how on earth do we control our own narrative now? Because there's one thing having a marketing strategy and a business strategy around a place, but actually, if I go somewhere I don't like it and I tell the world and I've got some compelling content behind it, that can really begin to influence people's perceptions. Definitely.
And obviously, kind of those marketing and TV adverts in the back in the day were very one-way direction, weren't they? Now that blend of that two-way communication around influencers. One thing I wanted to ask you a little bit about was AI trip planning. So kind of the influences which has come, and we kind of understand, and you talk about the impact of those. So with the emergence of AI in that sense, where does that come in to this? Have you seen that play a role yet?
I must be frank, it's something that we're still trying to understand.
We're all trying to understand it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, all I can say with any certainty is that it is definitely going to have an impact. Now, the extent of that impact, if I'm thinking logically about how people are currently using AI in and around conversations or asking questions about places or spaces, it might be. And an example that I used recently was when I was in Manchester.
Yeah.
I went to the wrong hotel by accident.
Yeah.
I was told I do not have a booking here. It's on the other side of town, which is fine. But I'd already made some plans on where to eat that evening.
Yep.
And that was the first time I'd, not without really thinking about it too much, I turned to AI and I said, I'm staying at this hotel. Where's the best place for food?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I could have done that on Google and it would
Yeah.
have given me a list of restaurants within a mile radius, right? But the AI model is obviously built differently.
Yeah.
And the way it creates its own content is from what is already plumbed into it. So, in theory, if you are a restaurant owner and someone has a particularly bad experience dining there, and then a slew of content erupts from that, then that will actually have it may, and again, I can't say it with certainty, but if you think about the way that AI works and the algorithms it uses, it will take all of that information it finds online and make a decision based on that negative feedback or sentiment and say, actually, you probably don't want to go here. And it will omit it from that list of, suggestions. So
Yeah.
it's,
and I guess it goes back to those people that you were chatting about, how do we curate our place? How do we tell the story, the narrative that we want to communicate? And I guess our visitors now being more algorithm led, not necessarily by their own decision point, but by how they interact and how they ask questions on what platforms and which spaces they ask those questions, rather than being brand led in that sense by that messaging that town wants to give out. And is there any research around how people discover and choose and filter places?
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because I think that by definition, we want to try and explore the new, don't we? And again, if we go back in time, not that far back, but there was that concept of exploration and discovery around new cities that you hadn't visited in Europe. You might look at a map and go, I've not been there before. I don't really know much about that. I'm going to go there. And I think that still exists. There is that excitement, but I think that people are now using those AI tools and using those digital platforms to help them make those decisions. Because I often think this. I mean, if me personally, if I'm making a decision to go on a city break in Europe, what will I look for? I might look for decent accommodation, lots of cultural things to do while I'm there for the 2-3 days. Will I be influenced by social media? Possibly, because if I go onto ChatGPT or there are other AI providers out there.
Yeah, of course. There's loads of them.
If you go onto one of these things and say, I'm looking for this, I'm looking for that, where should I go? Then by definition, you will be influenced by it, because it might say you should definitely go to X city, and it might say we, don't go to this one, in simplest terms. So I think, especially with AI, there's a lot of things that we don't quite understand yet. And again, that's a bit of a politician's answer. I understand that, but it is having an impact, and actually, it's having an impact on how how place leaders are having to think about where their own content sits. So to give you a bit of an example, and we work with clients on AI quite a bit, and again, we're still scratching under the surface of this, but if you think holistically about how AI works and what it wants, how can you get ahead of your competition in that respect? So AI, we're learning, really feeds off of trusted sources.
Yeah.
So if, for example, your City of London, take that as an example, City of London is featured in the Financial Times, it's featured in the Guardian, it's featured in other globally significant newspapers. Yes, in print, but also online. AI will reach for those sources before it reaches for stuff on X, for example.
A personal blog and all those bits and pieces, yeah.
Yeah, so there's a hierarchy to how it kind of how it reads content.
So trusted sources is important. So what other types of content matter in that curation of that place custodian, the audience of this podcast? what content should they be looking and prioritizing and kind of looking out for? What content matters most?
Well, believe it or not, having a solid website is actually really important now as well. We've gone through this period where it was almost like a digital first strategy, and website kind of came second. That is changing now, because of the AI models, they will go to a website and they will scrape the first page and read everything that's there. So having your, very similar to SEO, right?
100%.
It's the same thing. It's GEO, generative engine optimization. So it's effectively, I mean, we're in a place now where we're thinking about what the machine wants and how we can give it what it wants to get the best out of it. So that's the other thing.
And one thing we haven't talked about is kind of voice search. It's not a podcast about SEO and optimization and all those kind of things.
Yeah,
voice search is another aspect of it, isn't it, as well? So how early in that journey should that storytelling curation begin? And are there any examples of places doing this, curating this experience pre-arrival well?
Yeah, there's plenty of examples out there of cities particularly that are crafting their own stories. It is important to craft a narrative before people arrive. I definitely, in today's environment where the competition for spend, the competition for people's time is actually increasing. I mean, cities are competing in lots of different ways against each other, but for eyeballs and people spending money is equally as important. I can give you a couple of examples. There's one of my favourite stories, and actually, so there are two ways that this can work, and I kind of touched on this a bit earlier, but you can really focus on driving the narrative around your place, or as we're finding, or we found this year and in previous years, that actually this digital influence from individuals is actually having an impact as well. And I refer back to a presentation I gave earlier this year, where I kind of set out a few examples of this. So there's a very, very small bay area down in Cornwall.
Right,
it's near Truro. It's called Nangisel Bay. It's really off the beaten track. It's a beautiful little location. Nobody really knows about it from a tourist perspective. It's kind of a little residence local retreat.
Yep.
And that was until a TikTok influencer went down there for the day and posted a lovely video of the place and said it was called it the Seychelles of the UK.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this had a real impact because they were going from, I mean, this beach, I think from memory, it can hold around 100 people at any time. It's tiny, right?
Sure. Perfect for locals just to chill.
Yeah, just to chill out. But what you found is that because of that video, thousands of people were then turning up to this small beach. There was no infrastructure to host that many people at any given time. The locals weren't very impressed because all the roads were clogged up.
Yeah.
And actually, it was a very serious health and safety issue because this small cove area, it wasn't like going to Brighton Pier where you can just walk onto the beach. It was down a cliff, and it was quite perilous by all accounts. So there's a health and safety risk. So the emergency services were kind of on call 24/7 over that summer period. Now, long-winded way around saying it put that place on the map.
Yeah.
At that time, it probably wasn't for a very good reason. But if you think about the long tail of content and people's memory, then that now is a place that people will remember.
Yeah, so it's quite literally on the map in that sense.
Quite literally. They're not, so that's a kind of an accidental quirk of fate, if you like, just because somebody recorded a video and now everybody knows about it.
And I love that because, as you say, we can interrogate that situation and look at it from their various angles, see the positives, see the negatives. But place owners can learn from that by understanding maybe to curate that a little bit.
Yeah.
But if it does happen, thinking about what those things are that can be put in place temporarily, but also maybe more permanently.
Yeah.
Be able to facilitate, those facilities, that infrastructure. And that's what we always think from a wayfinding point of view. That pre-visit journey is really important, but we need to facilitate that journey. That might be through footpaths, it might be accessibility needs. It could be, like you said, that particular situation is kind of a bit of a health and safety risk. And so would there be things that could mitigate or help that, or even just close it off and say this is not possible, to be able to control that space?
Yeah, I mean, you have to really be able to react to those situations because they're so live. And I think that actually many places, many local authorities don't have the
resources.
They don't have the resources to deal with that at any given time. That, that might be different for a city like London or New York, but that example is a good case study, I think, on how do you try and take control of the narrative after the event has happened, because realistically you can't control it at that given time
because you don't know it's happening.
You don't know it's happening. You didn't know it was going to happen. It's never happened before. What do you do? But there are lessons that can be learned in controlling, at least from your end. When I say your end, I mean it might be the local authority or the city, what you can do to alleviate that. And you touched on some of those points. And I think wayfinding. Actually, there are a few more examples I've got. It predominantly, when it comes to these social media moments or digital moments, it does tend to be about that. It's about effectively a small place, a small town, smallish city that then gets kind of overburdened with tourists at any given time, and they just can't deal with it. That is, again, as you said, it depends how you view it. It can be a negative. But post-event can be viewed as a positive as well.
Definitely. So we've got to talk about that kind of that digital perspective with these things. We talk a lot about place branding and place management and place world, but branding, it's not, as we know, just about design. It's about that total narrative. It's about the story of a place. And looking at this from an online perspective, especially through social channels and influencers like we've been discussing, what makes a strong digital place brand in this day and generation?
Yeah. Well, I don't have to tell you this, but it's more than a logo.
100%.
It's definitely more than a logo and a strap line. Because we've worked with clients in the past and trying to develop some of these strategies. It's important to recognize, first of all, what your residents think about your place.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these strategies tend to be in and around, how do we get more people coming in? How do we get people to come in and spend more money? What's so good about our place? But actually, if you don't build that brand authenticity from the ground up, you're not really gonna. It can come across as a bit. I don't want to say fake, but you know what I mean. It's a bit.
I want to come on to that a bit later. Yeah, kind of like the perception of it. Like this is one theme that I've had when I've been thinking about this episode, is this whole perception of place. It's curated, it's decided beforehand, etc. But when we actually arrive in that physical environment, we've all seen the Instagram pictures where it looks beautiful, perfect, blue sea, whatever, if it's beach, whatever. And we get there, it's slightly different. So there's that balance around, isn't it? Creating that real place brand. That when I arrive, I know what I'm getting, and I kind of like when you advertise something on like eBay or Airbnb sometimes, was it as advertised?
Yes, yeah. Look, it's a challenge. I mean, all the years I've worked in kind of research and especially when it comes to placemaking, there are some things that have always struck me which still stand today, despite the fact we're in an age of digital media. You do have to be authentic. You do have to listen. You have to listen to your residents and actually listen to and engage with your tourists as well and find out what they actually think. You can't just tell people that your place is X or Y or Z. You almost have to earn that. Now, again, I've had discussions in the past where with local leaders have said, well, we don't really know what our place is. We don't really, we don't have a massive cathedral. We don't have a museum. We don't have, we don't have a bowling alley. We don't really have much at all. Why should people visit us? What can we say that differentiates us from this? Now that can be challenging. And we're talking really broadly here, but I would consider thinking about why, if I live in a local area, I've got a choice. I can go north, east, south, or west. Which way should I go? If I go north, I could probably go to my local major town. I can go south and go to the city. I can go east. I can go to, I might go to the beach. But why should I go that way? And finding that niche to offer people something that they don't have is, again, it's a challenge. But I think that we can get a bit caught up actually with placemaking around assets, like specific assets,
like that cathedral you mentioned, or that big
because
center, or
I mean, especially since we live, especially in the UK, there are a lot of identical copy and paste towns.
Yeah.
Now that's a complete other podcast that we could get into about what the solutions around that are. But I think it's about offering something to people that they haven't got, and that doesn't have to be shopping centres. It doesn't have to be going to visit the museum. It can actually just be, peace and quiet, or come and spend time here with your family because there's space to enjoy that. So it's tricky, but I assets are important, especially cultural ones, and I don't want to dispel that myth because they are really important. But lots of places don't have them, and actually there's a sort of trend that's emerged over the past few years where actually a lot of towns and cities in the UK are actually kind of leaning away from their cultural backgrounds, and for lots of different reasons, because it's actually in the 21st century not something that you should be shouting about.
The story kind of made past, Are there any examples of those like smaller towns using digital tools to for their weight?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm not going to name drop any specific towns, but it always helps when you are within reach of a bigger place. So,
audience, you've got kind of connectivity, all those other aspects. Enabling people to be able to use your, like you're saying, what do I go north, south, east, or west?
Yeah,
enable that as well, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, it's so easy in this country to go north and south, but it's actually very difficult to go east and west.
Yes.
And that does have an impact on, the very binary decisions that we make on where we travel and why we go there. Sometimes it's work, sometimes it's leisure, sometimes it's family. But in your free time, when you think about what I want to do, I want to make it as easy for myself as possible most of the time. So, in that instance, do I want to go into London to go out again?
Yeah.
The weekend? Probably not. So all of those things can have an impact on the digital footprint of places as well. Now, that's not something that they can really control. Okay. When we look at our analysis, and we do see that there are towns and cities that are, for lack of a better word, overperforming based on might be their population size or their geography. It's usually events.
Okay.
It's a lot of the time it is culture. Some of those towns that do benefit from significant cultural institutions. Again, that could be museums, or it could be things to do, art galleries. Definitely helps, because when we break down what it is that people are saying about towns and cities, it usually always is culture.
And it's experience, I guess, at the end of the day, isn't it? Creating experience, creating memories.
Yeah.
People can then document. We're going full circle, recording that on social media, and then that kind of goes viral, and it gets a wider audience.
Yeah. And look, we've, working wayfinding and placemaking, how this, this has been a narrative that has run through our industry for decades, isn't it? It's about what is your town's USP? Most of the time it's something to do around culture, because that's what put you on the map in the first place.
Yeah.
As competition kind of heats up for investment and for people, and I mean that from two perspectives: one, people moving to your place, but also two, people working there, and tourists. you have to continually evolve, I think. Now, there are places like the Cotswolds that are always going to be the Cotswolds because that's what they are by definition. That's their brand. Right? Their brand is really strong. And in our industry, we're seeing a lot of towns kind of scrambling a bit because they feel like they need to have a brand identity, and a lot of them are hedging their bets on like this AI revolution. You would have seen on LinkedIn multiple times, X town or city is leading the way in AI development, and we've got data centers or we've got life sciences. But that's a very business led,
corporate, yeah,
very, very corporate. I think from a more personal perspective or from a consumer perspective, I think, anecdotally, I think a lot of towns and places are still struggling post-COVID. I think there's still a hangover and a legacy of people who used to work in town centres that maybe don't.
It's a different world now. But the old term was the new normal, wasn't it? That was banded around during COVID, post-COVID.
I haven't heard that for ages.
No, exactly. Yeah, it's been kind of assigned to the shelves, isn't it? In that sense.
Yeah.
Kind of just picking up on that aspect of the future, and obviously no one knows the future. But what is data showing about how places are changing? And from your perspective, in media's point of view, what emerging behaviours or maybe data trends are telling us about the future of towns and cities and destinations? Is it something about shifts in mobility? Obviously, we mentioned remote work. We've mentioned AI itineraries, changing demographics. Is data pointing us in a direction in the future?
I was flicking through a report on the train this morning, recently released by the House of Lords on the impact of home working on the economy. And I must admit, I did flick. I did not read because it's a 150-page PDF. So
Sure.
I'll have to revisit it. But the impact of the way that we navigate places and spaces has changed because it's impacted how we work. It's impacted what we do when we're not working on our free time. And in 10 years ago, we might have been doing this at your office, for example.
Correct. Yeah.
And I could have done this from home, but so all of those things feed into and shape our behaviours in and around place. So what does that mean for the future of places? Well, it means you've got to work harder. You have to work harder to, the phrase that I hear all the time is earn the commute, right? So we talk about that when we're talking about people returning to the office en masse or indeed if they're not. But I think the same is true of places. You kind of have to earn it a bit more and positioning yourself in an age where we are, we are completely oversubscribed with content all the time, aren't we? We're constantly bombarded with content, whether we like it or not. Now, that can be a good thing for a small town or a place because it can give you that opportunity to say something. Now, what that something is depends on, lots of different things, right? But the platforms that we are seeing really shape, in an effect, what people are saying about cities. It's the video platforms that are having the most, that are really punching through at the minute.
Is that recorded video or live video or a mix of both?
Mix of both. But if you to get really forensic around it, we know as a communications consultancy anyway that video content performs better on digital platforms. You'll know when you scroll through LinkedIn now how much that's changed as a platform. It used to be very, I was pleased that I did this, or I'm delighted to have started my new job.
Yeah.
But very much like a live CV of sorts. But now it's a place where organisations and individuals can really shout about what they're doing in a much more live and interactive way. So video content is all over LinkedIn. Same is true, Instagram is a platform that's been around for quite a long time now. That still performs very well in terms of usage in and around places. So it's all about video content at the minute.
Maybe just kind of maybe start to wrap up then. How can digital research? I always want to make sure that when we are listening to this podcast as the audience, that we can go away with maybe a nugget or two of things that we can bring into our next board meeting, bring into our next conversation with our fellow place custodians. So how maybe can digital research and those insights that it gives to us actually inform something we're going to do on the ground next quarter to physical infrastructure, planning? How can we kind of use those things to inform our next steps as a place custodian?
Well, I think there's a couple of things there. One, you need to understand what the current state of play is. So when I speak to local authorities, cities, they will say to me, look, we want to position ourselves as X, but we actually don't know at the moment what platforms are on, what we're using, because there's so many different departments, components to places, isn't there? There's district authorities, local authorities, inward investment organisations that are all kind of pulling in the same direction, but not necessarily using the same tools or understanding how to use them. So one is about taking stock. What are we saying? What platforms are we using? What are our competitors doing? I think is important, because as I said, it's a competitive landscape out there. So if you're competing for talent and for money from your neighbour, you need to have a look at them and try and suss out how they're performing and try and find a measurement of success. So what platforms are you on? What are you saying? What are your peers doing? And then that should give you a really good indication of where the opportunity is. So not every place marketing wayfinding strategy should be defined by being completely different, but there are, the research will inform you on perception. It will inform you on, is our town recognised for this? Because the number of conversations I've had with local leaders who have said, we've been banging the drum around this for 10 years.
Yeah.
Again, it might be an institution, it might be something else. And then you look under the bonnet of the data and nobody's talking about it.
The residents need to create the story to start with. It's their town, it's their place.
Yeah.
And if we try to kind of tell a story that creates against that, it's never going to get traction, is it?
Yeah. So I think, having a solid foundation of digital analysis and research is a really good starting platform. It won't give you the answer, because you'll have to think up what the answer is. But if you have a good understanding of how your town is perceived and where the potential gaps are between you and your competition, be that geographically, it might be nationally, then you're then able to use that information to move forward. And I actually think that having a digital audit is it's actually a really good thing to do before you have especially for big cities, an inward investment strategy, whereby a city will say, we are a leader in life sciences, we are a leader in industrial and logistics, we are this. Like, well, you're saying you are, because that's where the money is, but actually, what is it that people recognise about your place? And I think I'll finish up there with a quote around what people think about places, which is one of my favourites, and that is, your visitors of today may very well be your investors of tomorrow. So yeah, I mean, look, cities and towns would, I think, really benefit from effectively a digital audit, some research that really helps them understand what it is that people are saying about them, why they're saying it about them, because that can then in turn really actually drive on a more macro scale, I guess, those inward investment strategies that you often see for bigger cities. So a lot of cities talk about being leaders in life sciences and data centers and logistics, but actually, what is it? What are you actually known for? I think is a really important point to try and laser in on, because I'm not saying that a digital visibility audit or understanding what it is that people are saying about you is the panacea, but actually those two things can really help to work each other and inform one another. So yeah, research is very, very important in lots of different ways. And having that real understanding of what's being said, what platforms are those conversations being had on? Are they on the right platforms? Are they on the kind of legacy platforms that people aren't using anymore, like X? If it's on X, forget about it. You need to transition that onto something else, and measure that against your competitors as well. What are your neighbours doing? What are your economic peers doing as well? Because you really need to understand, in a competitive environment, what it is that they're doing as well.
No, brilliant. I think we had an amazing, insightful and intriguing conversation around this particular topic. But if we episode, what would be one thing that we could take away from me as a custodian that we could action or we could be aware of now, having been part of the conversation?
I would suggest keeping it really simple. I know that's easier said than done sometimes, but having a view of what you want to be known for as a place. And that, when I say place, by the way, I can mean town, but I can also mean high street, and actually even local shopping centre. What is it you want to be known for, beyond the dollar signs, and really think quite broadly about why it is that people would want to come to your place, want to come to your asset. I think once you've got a good understanding of that, you can then begin to think about repositioning from a brand strategy perspective. Because if you don't know, effectively, you don't know the functionality of your place, if you don't know the wayfinding possibilities of not just that asset, but the spaces in between them, how do you activate those areas as well? Once you've got that kind of sorted, I think that then you can then have a real good stab at doing that brand marketing piece as well. So that does come second, but understanding what it is you're all about, again, very broad terms here, but understand what you're about, where you want to get to, and then that will inform your marketing strategy, which can be, it doesn't have to be a logo. Sometimes it is, but actually that message that you're sending out to residents, that message that you're sending to tourists, what is it? Why here? Why now? Which sounds like a huge task, and in many cases it is. But if you try and keep it simple and just think about what messages I should be saying to what audiences, then you'll be okay, I think.
No, I love that. That's a really key thing that we can now take away in our daily conversation. If someone wants to find out a bit more about James and where can they reach out to find out what they're involved with?
I mean, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me. You can drop me an email. I'm happy to share my email address, and you can upload it with the podcast if you like. But yeah, other than that, I mean, happy to chat more. The more conversations I have with individuals like you, John, who are doing a great job in wayfinding and placemaking, the better that I can understand our sector, and that then can actually really help me answer questions that I don't even know are questions yet. Do you know what I mean? So it's good to talk.
Brilliant, 100%. No, thanks very much for joining on this episode of the podcast. We look forward to continue this conversation and then learning more together about how we can improve places as a connected community.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for having me, John. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Navigating Now. I've been your host, John Doxey, and we're super excited to have you with us on this journey as we explore everything around people and places. Feel free to like and subscribe on YouTube and Spotify to continue this journey with us in discovering more about how our places can be more influenced positively together.